Burley Sew.
Hello everybody and welcome back to another Burley Sew. I'm your host Purified, and today we've got a quilted Christmas stocking that's embroidered, and we're just going to jump right into this one. This is the material that I used, and as a kind of a, I'm just doing this from scratch. I don't have a pattern made at this point, so I've got another cool stocking laying around, and I'm just going to kind of gauge what size I need to start with. And we're going to do this one quilted. So what I'm going to do is make the rectangle. Instead of cutting out the pieces and then quilting it, I'm going to quilt out a rectangle first and then cut out our piece, because then you don't have to worry about the piece shifting or moving. You've got your piece all set. So we're just going to measure up our inside and outside material, and then I've got some batting. It was just some crib batting that I had laying around, I think like extra loft, poly. So we're gonna fit up our three pieces. We've got the back here, we've got our outside fabric, and we've got our batting. And now we're just gonna make this into a sandwich. So we'll take our inside purple, lay it over nice. You can use spray adhesive if you like. That helps keep it in place, and I believe that's what I did. And you've got your outside fabric, so it's all in place and spread out and even. And now what we want to do is lay out our quilting design, and I'm just going to do simple diamonds. It's kind of what I do. It's a little tedious, but it's relatively easy to do, and I think it's got a pretty cool aesthetic. Okay, now you can do this two different ways. You can mark it and just follow your line, and I'm going to be using a walking foot with a guide attachment on the side. Or to see it a little bit better, I like to use painter's tape. I've got some thin painter's tape that I don't really use for anything else, and you can get a straight line with that, and you can follow that, and it's easier to see, and then you can just pull it off. So that's what I'm going to end up doing here. And then ultimately we're going to crisscross. So first we're going to do this way, and you'll be able to see in a minute the guide on my walking foot, but on the left of the tape there is the guide, and you can adjust that, slide it in and out. I've got it at about an inch and a quarter, I would say. And you can just follow that line all the way down, and then you're just going to repeat until you're done. Basically, you'll be able to pull this tape off and follow the guide. And I've got a video on the walking foot out there, but I don't have one with the guide in it. So now you can see the guide, and it's very useful. It stays in place, and you can see it better there, and you just follow the line with it. It just kind of sits in the ditch of your sewing, and it makes it very easy to just do this type of design. So after repeating that several times, you can see we've got one way done, and now we'll mark the other way. And I'm just gonna use my trusty tape here against my straight edge, and I'm using my mat to measure out the angles. There's a 60-degree mark on the mat that I was using. And now I'm just gonna start my new first line with my tape, and then I'll be able to repeat it over and over and over until I'm done, and then do that with the other piece, because you're going to want two pieces, one for each side of the stocking. And now we can get ready to cut out our template or pattern. I just use this roll of packing paper that I have. That's roughly the size of our quilted rectangles. And then we'll be able to draw our pattern on there. And I'm just going to freehand what I think it should look like initially. And this turns out to not be the greatest design. It's too much of a right angle on the foot. It should actually be dipping down. And you're going to also want to make it wide. This one I didn't make wide enough to fit over the sleeve arm of the sewing machine, and you'll see that later. So to kind of improvise. But once you're happy with your shape, and like I said, I do this differently next time, but once you're happy with your shape, go ahead and cut it out, and now you've got your pattern. And I'm just gonna look at the pattern and see how this material has owls on it, so I want to get as much owl as I possibly can. So I'm just gonna see which way putting the foot will get the most owl, I guess. Once I've got that figured out, I can just kind of flip it over. That's just the way I want it to be, and go ahead, and now I can trace out the outline of my pattern and then cut the material. So now that we've got it all cut out, we can cut out our other piece. And you want to make sure that you put the outsides together when you trace out your second piece. And you can just use your piece that you just cut out if you like, or you can use your pattern, but make sure that you're marking it a way that the outside of the fabric is going to be facing each other when you sew it, because you'll sew it shut and then you're going to turn it inside out. So when you turn it inside out, you want obviously the fabric that you intended to be pointing out on the outside. So there you go, there's the two pieces that we cut. And now I'm going to do a little bit more work. I decided that I wanted to do toe and heel support on this. So before I pin these together, I'd have to do that. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm just going to take my original pattern and I'm going to add in what I think would be toe and heel support. And then I'm just going to make a pattern off of this. I'll take a piece of paper and I'll just trace it with a pencil so I can feel the outside edge. And then I'll go over it again with a Sharpie so that I can see it. And then what I'll do is I'll end up cutting it out. And now I've got a pattern for the heel, and then I'll make another one for the toe. And then I've got another material picked out for the toe and heel pattern, as well as that'll match the top cuff. And there's a couple different ways that you can attach this on. I end up using like an applique type of technique, or you could simply just cut out the piece out of the material. You could back it with some stabilizer. There's a bunch of different things that you could do if you wanted to be creative. I used the fusible interfacing. I had some laying around. I thought it'd be neat to try out, and it works really great. It's comes in real handy. You can pretty much attach, it turns your material into like a patch, and you can check out my video to see more and then come back to this if you like. So that's what I'm doing right now, is I'm just tracing out my pattern on the interfacing, and what I'll end up doing is just cutting out that interfacing and ironing it on. And now we've got our pieces after I've cut them out. Makes it real easy to cut them out. And like I said, they're just like stickers, so you just peel the backing off and then you put them on here. Well, not like stickers, but like patches. Now you can iron them on, and once they're ironed on, put your stitching in. And I'm going to use an applique stitch for the part that's visible of my stocking. The heel and toe will be hidden by the seam, so you can do a basting stitch if you want. But now that we have these complete, I'm not going to do any more decorations on them. If you wanted to do ribbon or something, you would still want to do that before you sew this together. So if you wanted to decorate maybe that seam there, and then make sure too that you've got, if you got reinforced toe and heel, that you've got the toe and heel where it meets on the seam lined up correctly. That's going to be important for your aesthetics. And then just go ahead and pin it up. And once you've got it pinned up, you can just put a stitch all the way around it. So now we'll just complete this sewing and take our pins out, and then we just turn it inside out gently. And we've got our stocking, this part complete. And you can always stuff something down in there like a ruler or whatever you have to poke that out. But now I'm going to clean it up. I'm going to trim it down to the size, because the next thing that we're going to start working on is the cuff. So I'm going to get rid of this edge up here, kind of get something nice and clean to work with, get my pieces set up. This is going to be the loop that you're going to hang it from. I'm just using some bias tape for that I had. And that's going to come a little bit later, but it's going to get sewn on the inside. And then we're going to use the same material for the reinforced toe and heel for the cuff. And I'm going to kind of just ballpark this first piece and see if it goes and fits the way I want. I end up wanting to make it a little bit bigger, but I'm going to go ahead and iron this out, and then I'm going to sew a seam right down the ends where the ends meet, and then I'll iron my seam nice and clean. And then what we'll do is we'll turn this inside out, and this is going to be our cuff. And ultimately you're going to want to make it about one time around plus another half for this style that I'm doing. I came up a little bit short. I wish it was a little bit longer, but you want to be able to wrap it around one time, and plus now be able to bring that edge, I'm going to pause it here, all the way over to the left. That extra inch or two there would have been nice to have. But this is the way it's going to lay. And then I'm going to put a scallop on this edge here. And to give you an idea what that's going to look like, it's going to kind of curve around, and then we're going to attach that border to it. And this is my handy dandy method of making the curve, because I couldn't find my compass. I just used this bowl that I had by my fish stuff. So we'll cut along our line, and then we're going to fold it inside out again, because we're going to sew it. And keep in mind too, you want this seam kind of in the back, so that's why it's in the middle there. It's going to be in the back of our cuff. And now we'll take this over to the machine, and we'll sew a stitch right along the curve right there. So now we've got our stitch in, and we'll turn it inside out, and we'll make sure that we get the point there, get it the way we want it. And it looks great. Now we'll take the bottom edge, the edge that's open, and I'm just going to fold it over. This is going to go underneath. You will not be able to see it at all. So I'm going to put a nice clean stitch in there and just fold that piece over. I'll iron it. And there you go. It's looking nice. It's looking like a cuff. Like I said, I wish it was a little bit longer, so you want to get it that 1.5 times. So I'm going to measure it up here, and I still don't realize that it's going to be short. But now that we've got it pretty much worked out, we can go ahead and lay out. I'm going to put my daughter's name on this, so I'm going to lay out where I want that, and I'm just going to kind of mock up the trim. I'm going to use my straight edge here, and I think that I want to put it on an angle. So that looks good to me. And I'll just take my chalk here, and I'm going to mark a box that I want the letters to fall inside of. So I'll just put a mark here on the bottom, and then another mark on the top. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my embroidery hoop out and put some tearaway stabilizer hooped in there, some medium weight tearaway, and I'm going to spray it with spray adhesive. And I'm going to take this piece and set it on there where I want to embroider her name. I'm not going to hoop it. I probably could have. There's plenty of material there to grab. But I was feeling a little lazy, so I figured I'd just use some adhesive and do it like that. It's pretty sturdy and thick material. It's not going to move very easy. So I've got the name in there, and I want to make sure that it's centered correctly, and I've got videos that show how to do a lot of this stuff, so I'm kind of just going to go over it briefly. But once I feel that I've got it centered, I'm going to go ahead and stitch out the name. And as I was doing this, I had the idea of putting a border around the name. So once this is finished stitching out, we'll go ahead and take a look at putting the border on. Alright, so we've got that done, and to put the border on, I'm going to use an oval border, and I'm going to do a more in-depth video on how to do this in the future. But you want to make sure that it's centered, and I'm going to use the template and make sure that my name is in the center of the ring, because otherwise it's going to look just wrong. So I'll make my adjustments and stitch it out, and stay tuned, subscribe if you haven't. I'll have the video of how to center the name in here, and I think I did a pretty darn good job. It's right in the middle. I'll do a little bit more detailed video on that, but you can see the border looks great, and her name's in the middle. Now we can go ahead and attach the trim, and I'm going to use two pieces. I'm going to use this pink and white lace, and then I'm going to use this beaded band. And first I'm going to lay down the lace. I pinned it on and followed it along the edge, and leave the ends with about an inch, maybe a half inch to an inch unsewed. So when you start about a half inch from, or 3/4 of an inch from where you normally would start, and end about an inch or 3/4 of an inch from where you normally would end. And you'll see here that I don't go all the way. I'm gonna end up folding this under and then finishing like that. You can finish the end any way you did. I was a little sloppy, probably could have done a better job, but just be careful of how you do that. You want it to look good. And now is where I screw up. So ultimately I want to place the cuff the way that it's going to be, so that when I flip this thing inside out, it's going to be facing the way I want it, with the right side of the material out. And it would have been very easy to just sew it like a sleeve or a cuff, but I didn't make it wide enough. So you want to make sure that you make that wide enough, and what I end up having to do is improvise, which you often have to do. And I ended up ripping the seam a little bit and attaching what I could by machine with one flap folded down, and just kind of working my way in there. And a big chunk of it I had to do by hand as well, but I finished it up. I got it the way I wanted it, and now when I flip it inside out and get it all shaped and formed, and get this fold up here around the top of the cuff the way you want it, maybe put a couple extra stitches in, and then attach your hanging ribbon, and you've got your quilted stocking. I bet you guys could even do better, but we went from this to this, and I'm happy. I've learned a few things. I hope you did too. If you liked what you saw, please subscribe. Leave your comments below. We've got more Christmas videos coming up, and thanks for watching Burley Sew.